Hello and welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depending from where we are connecting to this very exciting next webinar. Very pleased to welcome today, actually 4 instead of 5 extraordinary pharma speakers. So from left to the right, pleasure to welcome Sudhir Mahakali from Sandoz. Hi Sudhir, how are you?
I'm doing well, Dario. Really happy and excited to be on this panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Then pleased to welcome Alexei Cherchago from Sandoz as well, colleague from Sudhir, obviously. Hi Alexei, how are you?
I am good, Dario. Happy to be here today.
Thank you, Alexei. And Philippe Kirby from MSD. Philippe, same question for you. A tough one, right?
Yes. Sorry, you can't see me, everyone. Hello, all is fine.
Thank you. And last but not least, Orchid from Odaia. Orchid, same question for you. How are you and how's weather in beautiful Canada?
It's fantastic, and I think it's actually warmer than Europe and where Philippe may be. So pretty excited about that. It's rare for us. Great to be here and very excited to be part of this discussion.
So now we are jealous, but I think that some part of Europe are also enjoying some nice weather. Okay, so today's theme, augmenting the customer experience with AI-powered analytics. I think this will be a quite interesting discussion and a big challenge to satisfy the needs and the expectations from the audience. And first of all, I would like to start with a very critical question, which is COVID generated a huge amount of data, which we all know. But how and when AI can benefit from that huge amount of data? Let's start with you, Orchid.
So, I mean, it's amazing how much data there is, and it depends on what perspective of data we are referring to. So from a position of people who are experiencing COVID, sadly, there's too much data. And I think almost every pharma company, and I can't speak for any right now because I haven't been part of the pharma world for a year and a half. I think every pharma company is trying to figure out how to help people with COVID with not just the data, but using the data to understand patterns of people's behavior, not just how they're suffering from COVID, but also what they're doing in terms of using resources. So how our patients, for instance, are doing very different things during COVID in terms of virtual health versus going to see their doctors live. So that has completely, I think, transformed the way pharma works in terms of geographic one-on-one, face-to-face kinds of discussions. So it brings up opportunities. But I think from my perspective, I'm very passionate about the augmenting the experience of the customer being the internal customer as well. So the actual customer being a sales rep, for instance, the world of the rep has completely changed. So I think using that data to see how we can actually help the people on the ground, the front-facing people, do better during this time is something that I feel that we could do better in on our side, on the analytics side, as well as pharma.
Thank you, Orchid. Sudhir, same question for you.
Yeah, so Dario, I think I completely echo what Orchid mentioned about the data deluge, with respect to during COVID times, simply because a lot of the interactions went digital, right? And so you have more insights coming in that need to be trapped. Now, with regards to your second part of your question on how and when it is available to AI, I would say that we have this challenge that when we are incubating, prototyping models, I think we are able to do well with accessing the data any way, form or fashion it's available. But then when you get into serious industrialization mode and you want to go live with streaming data or with data that needs to be a little bit more modeled for the machines to pick it up, I think we are a good 6 to 12 months away. So typically this is the conversation that we are having, that the infrastructure, right, aspects really came front and center now. And without the infrastructure capabilities on the connectivity front, which is really going cloud, that's the only way there is to scale. And then on the modeling aspects, right, to be able to manage the graphical nature of interactions between the data, you're not going to, leverage it in an industrialized setting. So I would say we are, from our perspective, right, the work needed to get it from the current state to a target state is 6 to 12 months away.
Thank you, Sutir. Let's move from Sando to MSD. And Felipe, let's hear your point of view on this interesting discussion so far.
Yeah, very interesting points of view already shared on the data leelage, and certainly I think even if we had made headways in terms of engaging people, data scientists, because I think we need to look at this from a people, process, and technology perspective, and started getting these data scientists to be able to talk to our marketers and vice versa, and really understand what business problems we were trying to solve. We just weren't ready for it. And so here, all of a sudden, yes, we were confronted with all this data, all this insights, and a need to really exploit it, because all of a sudden digital was really the only means to communicate with customers. And so, we were kind of caught off guard. And I think that's really to add to what's been said so far is really that next thing is to say, how do we really define what we want to do with this data? What are we going to use it? So, the title of this is around improving customer experience, but still, more precisely, exactly what does that mean? What are we going to do in terms of improving customer engagement? So I think that's really the next focus. And certainly one of the things we're looking at, and we're going to talk about things like next best engagement and so on, but thinking through about how we actually exploit that data to say, how do we add value to customers? How do we give them what they value? Because what they value is what's going to make them want to engage with us more and have that better customer experience.
Thank you, Felipe. Alexei.
A lot of good points. I would say there are several use cases, right, related to COVID, where AI-based tools and technologies are being used. And first of all, it's detection and diagnosis of COVID cases, right? And here, several AI systems have been designed, developed for diagnostic of COVID using, medical imaging technologies such as chest computer tomography, for example, or X-ray images. There are also some systems designed around epidemiological predictions, predicting, mortality rate, for example, or long-term patient hospitalization, all these elements, patient outcomes for COVID-19. Here, I would say quite a lot of good results, and I strongly believe that here AI has a huge potential, right, in the battle against pandemic in general and specifically COVID, right? However, there are several limitation factors that slow down successful practical deployment of these AI-based tools. What is interesting? One of key challenges which AI experts are reporting is the lack of access to sufficiently large data sets for training and external validation of our AI models. We generated a lot of data, but still there is a challenge for AI experts. Without appropriate data governance and protocols for pandemic, one can hardly address this problem. Yeah, there is also a need to educate AI experts on a regulatory landscape, providing the deployment of AI tools in healthcare. And actually, clinicians and other experts should work with data scientists in multidisciplinary context to address concerns over data collection and privacy. I believe that these cross-functional teams with expertise in medical data collection should support AI scientists who design this training algorithm and hand over to healthcare institutions to train models locally. And addressing these challenges will ultimately accelerate the transition of AI research into practical and useful solutions for combating pandemics, exactly what Sutir reflected.
Thank you, Alexei. Next question is related to our expectations of AI, and we know all the cliche that robots and AI will substitute us in 1 year or 2 or 3 whatsoever, which means that I think we are definitely wrong with our basic expectations when we speak about AI. And on the other hand, as we all know, in many regards and cases, still the infrastructure for proper AI is still not ready yet, right? From internet speed, from computing power, and so on. So my next question would be, are really our expectations of AI wrong? and not aligned with the current possibilities and capabilities? Sutir, maybe we can start with you because I feel you are very strong in that regard.
Sorry, I was unmuting myself. Thank you, Dario. I think this, again, right, this is an excellent question with respect to, the state of AI as we see it, right? And, the state of, AI today versus, what is actually available in an industrialized context is where my focus is, right? So I think you can do a lot in a laboratory setting, but when you go into a factory setting where AI recommendations are actually driving, the business users, that's where, right, things, are not as they should be, right? And the difference, right, is like you pointed out that, there is a certain, view that, AI is going to magically solve all the problems, or AI is going to replace humans, right? I think these are, two topics, right, which are to be addressed, right, from a education and training perspective, right? So I absolutely agree that, you need to contextualize your expectations of AI based on many things, right? One note is the state of your enterprise, right? The state of your organization and the maturity of your organization, right, is a key determinant of what output can you derive from this technology, right? Because it is, I think Philippe mentioned, right, it is a combination of process, technology, people, all of that coming together. So it's not a one-dimensional thing, right? So that's one determinant. And typically, obviously, the bias is that I will start with the AI solution and then it becomes the next new shiny thing. And then, you have the, hype cycle, and then you go with the, excitement and then the slope of disillusionment, right? You typically follow the hype cycle as you go towards industrialization, right? So the second key topic comes from our previous conversation on infrastructure. If you have planned for infrastructure, right, not just on the technology side, but on the capability side, right? So I give you a brand new car, but your users are unable to, know the functionality of the brand new car. It's going to be a problem, right, with respect to, how you use the brand new car. So the second topic, which is also a determinant on your expectations of AI, is do your users know, right? Apart from managing expectations on what the brand new car is, do they actually know, right, what to do with the car, right? And that's a big topic. Again, right, from a training perspective, right? Those are two key areas that I am seeing in my daily life, that, there are folks like Alexei who are actually business advocates, champions, right, who are coming to fore. The folks like Orchid who are talking about the possibilities, but where the connection happens is a good mix of, setting the baseline with the community that is using it. So these are two topics I would say are, very key to position your expectations of AI. And the last one, with respect to, people losing jobs, is another topic that always comes up. And I would say we are 5 years away or 10 years away from autonomous, systems, right? You will see the cars and autonomous cars, you will see autonomous rockets, you will see all of those, kind of evolving. And then autonomous applications, right, in the life sciences space, probably 5 to 10 years, where, you're going through the paces, right, of the industry. So my note is it's going to be augmented intelligence and not artificial intelligence for next decade. That's my response.
Thank you, Sutir. Very meaningful. Alexei, let's take it on.
There are actually different areas of application, right, with quite different adoption level and satisfaction of end users. If you look at R&D, AI techniques even now are applied across whole drug development process to speed up drug discovery, to build predictive models, as well as I don't know, discovery and identification of biomarkers, right? Yeah, I would say that we have very solid progress, right? And AI methods are aligned with our expectations. Here we have good and solid results. Then, when we are talking about commercial, it's important, first of all, to demystify AI. And when you do hear the word AI, it's pretty broad term, right? And what is it? Any systems mimicking, I don't know, human decision-making processes AI, right? It's ability of a system to interpret data, learn from these data sets, and maybe achieve some specific goals using obtained knowledge, right? If we expect that we put all our data in one algorithm, one engine, run it, and as a result, we know exactly where to go with our business, most probably existing technologies are very far from it, yeah? There are several enablers of digital transformation in pharma. I don't know, like AI is one of them. And in a nutshell, AI and machine learning techniques enable better usage of the data which we are collecting. And efficient usage of this data brings positive impact on our services and customer satisfaction. However, it can hardly substitute a human making final decision. We need to identify where AI is superior to other technologies and humans, right? And what problems we solve and what success looks like. Then probably level of satisfaction will be higher. Together with quite significant progress of AI applications in predictive modeling, such as forecasting, it would be great to see more examples of descriptive and predictive analytics cases, especially at the level of medical representatives. There is a change in split between transactional and non-transactional activities while they engaging with the customers, right? That implies increasing level of complexity while we are moving from face-to-face, pure face-to-face, like we had in the past, to hybrid engagement. Here, dynamic analytics and real-time recommendations are bringing a lot of value. And I don't think that available commercial products are fully aligned with our expectations for this specific for such use cases.
Thank you very much, Alexei. Maybe just to add, especially what Suthi mentioned previously, I think that on some jobs and vacancies, we see a quite big pressure in overall, because we see, as an example, in UK, we miss 5,000 truck drivers, right? And on the other hand, we see Nikola, we see Tesla, they are producing autonomous driving trucks and so on. So I think that some things, due to this urgency, will just accelerate, and investments will even increase in that segment and regard. And even, of course, the regulations will also become much better to favor such new way of technologies, right? Orchid, same question for you. Are our expectations wrong with AI? And I believe you really have some good insight because you're working with many different pharma companies.
So I wish I had gone first because Alexei and Sudhir stole a couple of points I wanted to make, but I really want to pick up on that. So I am not an AI expert. I'm not an analytics expert. I spent almost 30 years of my life being a user of these. Well, actually, 30 years ago, there were no tools similar to this, but let's say the last 5 or 6 years we had CRM. But I've spent a big chunk of my life trying to understand, and actually 8 years of my life trying to have sales folks and sales managers embrace tools like this. So from my perspective, what really touches me when is what Sudhir said about the two things that are kind of off on the expectation of AI. One is that it's going to solve all your problems, and the other is it's going to replace people. So I didn't leave pharma to go to big bad tech to replace people, because already pharma has a funny reputation, and I did not want to go to the bad side again. You know, all in jest. But the reality is what gets me excited, and what is exactly what got me excited when I was on the pharma side, which is how do we humanize these things? You know, whether you're actually selling a drug. When I spent a big chunk of my life selling in the MS space, and having my team talk about the person with MS, not a patient with MS, but a woman who cannot go up the stairs with her kids because she's 25 years old and she can't function because of her MS. And when we changed our selling model to that versus features and benefits, our sales went up. And what I want to do with AI in our company is exactly this, because I think that AI is an overused word. I don't think I understand it fully. I have a lot of friends who I go to who are super smart in this area, who educate me all the time and remind me that what we're doing is not true AI. And I actually read a funny quote the other day. According to Google's CEO, Sundar Pichai, AI's impact will be seen greater than even of fire or electricity on our development as a species. I think that's a huge stretch for me. I do not agree with that. I actually think AI is, it's really the interface right now between humans and machines. And if we can augment what's happening right now, that's where we need to go. And I think, to Alexei's point, AI in the other side of pharma, which is R&D, which is clinical therapeutics, has taken off and doesn't seem to have as much resistance to it, I think. And I think it's because when you're in a lab trying to improve your genetic pathway to a target, you don't have humans standing up and going, that's going to take over my job. I actually think here we're truly talking about possibly replacing some jobs. So some of that is true, I think, Sudhir. To say that we're not replacing humans, I think that to some extent we will replace some of the things that humans do, and hopefully it's the stuff that we don't like to do. So in our world, for instance, the AI analytics that the predictive power of AI analytics is replacing those years I remember toiling over Excel spreadsheets, which unfortunately hasn't changed that much. Pharma is still using those Excel spreadsheets. In fact, I think I'm using those Excel spreadsheets. So those are the things that we need to kind of upgrade on. And I think in terms of problems, someone said earlier that, I think it was you, Philip, in terms of the people side is over here and sometimes the business side is over here. I obviously see that, and now in my world, as I deal with many different pharma companies, some of them I worked at before, and I think it's the issue is sort of trying to bridge that gap. So when you say, Sudhir, build the capability, absolutely, but we should be building things with AI that don't require a ton of training. Some of these tools that we use are very clunky and they're ugly, and the reps don't like using them, and they won't use them, and they will put garbage in, garbage out. So for me, it's like, let's build some beautiful tools in pharma. Why can't a tool look like an iPhone and be gamified? And so that's where I have a bit of a bias, because I don't think that pharma's in that mindset to create beautiful tools. And those are things that, when I say beautiful, I say it kind of light, but I do mean things that a rep will pick up and use. And maybe we don't have to build everything all at once. Maybe you can pick up some of those things. And our companies like Odaia are attracting a different kind of talent than a Novartis would, for instance, or a Sandoz would. And I think it's just because these people are built to create these things, and we can gamify a lot of this to the patient's benefit. So this is where I think I agree there's a long process. The data has to be clean. There has to be systems. But if we wait too long till that's happened, I think some of the smaller companies possibly will buy off the shelf and jump ahead, because it's not, the fine tuning maybe can happen over time, and it doesn't have to happen in the first step.
Absolutely, that's natural evolution and selection, I would say. Felipe, same question for you.
It's quite interesting coming after all this and coming on the back end of 4 already pretty interesting points of views. But actually, I can draw some parallels and make a few connections here. So the first one is, Alexei, you talked about demystifying AI, and certainly, and then you also you mentioned use the term use case. When we came into the pandemic, we were already doing AI type of applications, and Orchid, you're referring to the Salesforce. So that was the very first application we saw in commercial machine learning type approaches with what we called internally smart suggestions. So we would have the rep accompanied by the smart suggestion engine that would say, hey, here's what you should do next when you meet with this customer based on the history we have in terms of interactions and content that you showed him. And that was really the I would call it, if you're going to go through a crawl, walk, run, fly type of approach to establishing AR, that would be kind of your first use case and the one that everybody established. And then on the humanized side, which you referred to, Orchid, which I think is really important too, we said to the reps at the time, think of it as a golf caddy. You're going to go out, you're going to play a round of golf, and the golf caddy is going to make some suggestions on the club, but in the end, you have the final say. So if it's a, if it's a 7-iron that he's suggesting, but that's not one you want to do, and you want to go for a 6, well, that's your choice. You can go out and do that. And that worked fairly well. And at the time too, what was interesting is the AI would learn both from what suggestions the rep took and the ones that they ignored, and you continue to build on that. So that's the very first use case. And then the pandemic comes along, and all of a sudden we're saying, well, wow, we need to be able to apply this to digital and all our digital engagement. We need to go into really omni-channel, and we need to have AI applied to omni-channel, because our marketers, our people are setting up our omni-channel campaigns. It's getting complicated for them. So they're the ones who really need help, but nobody had any really real solutions. And maybe they do exist now, and certainly we're starting to look into that. But so that was one of the very first use cases we started asking our data scientists to start developing, saying, hey, start thinking about it more from an omni-channel, digital first type of approach, but never forgetting that omni-channel does include the sales force. Well, I think this was really one thing that we need to be able to move kind of that from that scale of single channel or rep driven type of channel to something that's much more omni-channel in nature. So that is one way of looking at it. I think the other thing I would think of is what about the content? So when we were thinking of channel engagement, we were thinking of channels, and we weren't really always thinking about content and content consumption. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later, I'm sure, in some of the questions we get. But it's also understanding content, because the content they consume, that's where you get a lot of insights on what customers really value. And so I think that is also the next frontier, is really doing a proper job of understanding the content and what customers value, so that we can continue to return value to the customers.
Thank you, Felipe. Learned a lot already. And next question, we all know that culture and change management and changing people is, of course, one of the greatest challenges, right? But my question would be, why people usually don't want to do what AI says, or why they don't want to listen to AI? Felipe, let's continue with you if you agree.
Yeah, so I definitely mentioned the golf caddy example, which was one way of saying to people, look, look at it from a different perspective. This is not here to tell you what to do. It is here to make a suggestion. So you really needed, can't put enough emphasis on the human approach. I think the other thing is, which I also mentioned initially, is we needed to spend some time, and I think Sudhir, you went down, you were going down the education path too. So we needed to educate. So we need to educate our data scientists. I mentioned this, learn that data scientists need to learn on how to work with pharma marketing, and I specifically say pharma marketing. Somebody else also talked about regulations, and that we need to be able to work within our commercial space. And then the other way around, how do we get our marketers to be much more data driven, to think in much more of an iterative fashion, shorter cycles, not be thinking, I got a whole year to optimize my campaigns. No, this is internet speed. We need to be able to do it, if not, overnight, at least within 1 or 2 weeks. So there's and again, thinking people process. So we adapt our people, we educate them, we adapt our processes. I think agile in this context is very important. And certainly I'm sure we're not the only pharma company that's invested in agile pretty significantly in the commercial space. So there you adapt your processes so that people are thinking more about that iterative type of approach. And then, the final piece, of course, is the technology, which is about being able to, and I think there was a really interesting point too made by Orchid about the UX, the user experience. So it's nice to think about the CX for the external customer, but what about the user experience for the internal customer? So that, yes, you spend time on educating them, but that time to educate them goes down significantly, because the UX is better, it's easier to use, it's something that you can exploit, and people can be efficient without tons of education. So that is also an internal focus now, is not just thinking about the external world, but about making our internal world also better from a customer experience perspective.
Thank you, Felipe. Alexei, let's continue with you. You're on mute, Alexei.
Sorry, I think that the level of trust is not exactly the same within different application scenarios. And as I mentioned, adoption of AI, for example, in R&Ds is better than, for example, in commercial. When we are talking about, for example, next best action for sales representatives. There are a lot of well-established methods in medical image recognition, right? And all these technologies are working pretty well and well accepted by healthcare practitioners. The starting point for beta AI adoption is around bringing AI at scale, I think, that in its turn is a function of data, systems, and culture. All data need to be consolidated around one platform and well segmented to be used efficiently. You know, it's critical to have I would call it homogeneous, you know, integrated information and technology. Something like, I don't know, essential record for customer data, right? Or transparency around impact of communication channels in use. Unfortunately, we have a lot of legacy systems, you know, and we do not have any opportunities, you know, to build everything from scratch, right? Therefore, this topic should be addressed somehow. Equally important, and we mentioned this, is a cultural perspective. Right culture starts with a common agreement in the company around data-driven decision-making process while approaching business questions. And this is quite important because if we rely on data, then we should have a proper attitude. You know, we should instead of you know ignoring data, we should try to understand, interpret this data. And it's also very important to ensure collaboration between AI experts and business functions. Philippa mentioned around the marketing and data scientists, for example. I think that our colleagues in R&D found somehow a common ground. They are using common language. They're able to talk to data scientists. Exactly the same should be done by us in commercial. And by the way, as with all other technologies, we need proper support for AI from the side of technology and organization. So even 1-2 years ago, we probably didn't have data scientists in our teams, but by now all these people are kind of part of our teams, right? I think technology, data, and culture in terms of organization and proper attitude to data.
So these are the foundations. Thank you, Alexei. Orchid, let's continue with you.
Yeah, I love what you said, Alexei. It brings me back. I feel like I'm like my world is so much older. There definitely was no data science when I was in pharma to that extent. And that's not that long ago. And I still have people come to me and say, what does that really mean? Is that an engineer? Is that a software person? Like people within organizations that we talk to still are very confused about that role. And I think part of the culture change is exactly what you're saying, is to educate people on what it means to be making decisions based on data and intuition, not just intuition. And again, going back to your example, which I honestly hadn't thought about until now, which is why is it that AI is moving faster on the other side of pharma, is because there's no person putting up their hand going, I actually think, you know, the DNA goes this way versus this way. But we have humans that have been doing this for a long time, and sales is obviously a very touchy-feely, intuitive, but also analytical process. And I think what I would love to see is that just like we brought in the medical side to teach us about, so the medical affairs plays that role in pharma. Interestingly, I don't actually have a background in science either, and I survived in pharma for a very long time. But I used a lot of those people to help me understand what is a T cell and a B cell and all this stuff in my language that would help me talk to an oncologist. I didn't need to understand everything. And so, but there was definitely that translation that happened between medical and marketing, medical and sales, to allow us to understand the need for that, being evidence-based when you're speaking to a specialist. It's the same thing where I think, as you mentioned, everyone's coming in. There's a lot of digital folks. A lot of people don't have the experience, and they're becoming, you know, digital people. And I think we, as a company, actually at odaia, we're really trying this hard. We're small, but we are actually partnering with many different companies to try to educate on this front as well. I think obviously internally there's a lot of education to be done because you have the experts internally, but there has to be some kind of understanding by a sales rep even what is AI, and it's not going to take away your job, before all of this comes down and says, hey, use it. And I think that's what the gap is right now. That culture is, it's just happening really fast. And I think people just need to embrace it. I'm frustrated when I speak to marketers. I used to do marketing for many years as well, where they're saying, we can't talk to you right now about analytics stuff or AI or digital because, we're in the brand planning process. And I'm like, well, isn't this part of your brand planning process? And why are you using digital only at the end of your brand planning process when you're spending money on the digital stuff? Don't you want to know what the value, to Philip's point, like the omnichannels all have value, and don't you want to look at what these things are costing you before you decide you're going to do this, this, and this, and this. So I don't think an average marketing person really right now is really seeing the opportunity of learning how AI, whatever you want to call it, AI, ML, predictive analytics, how this can be a real huge resource in a competitive way if they can launch a product knowing exactly, which customer they should go after, with what product, with what message, with what content, with what channel. Those are all things that marketers have been saying for years and years and years. Now you have a tool to be able to do that. But I don't see marketers ask for this. Even if it's not available, they should be asking for it. And I think it's up to us as leading this conversation about this and demystifying AI to bring those educational programs in so they're very accessible, and get people to start using some of these concepts and words. And maybe it's kind of like a new idea I have now. Maybe I need to start a new business. But it's this talking to the average user of AI. The other part of the culture, I think, has to do with, I don't think companies, everyone talks about agile. I think it means, like AI, it means different things to different people. I think agile in a tech company is very different than agile in a pharma company. I would say shrink it by 1,000 in terms of time. The kind of stuff that we do overnight, I'm pretty sure pharma can't do overnight. So what I'm saying, the reason I'm mentioning this is, if you want to be agile, I think it's not a bad idea to think a little bit like these little companies think. And some of that is possible within small pilots. For instance, we have products where we need to iterate with a customer. We need to go back a lot and design it. Or if it's already designed, we still need the users to come back to us and validate it. Pharma has a tough time with that because, again, the culture is very much, we go to a consultant, we give them all our stuff, we give them our data lakes, we get them to get in there for 2 months, and then they come back, we do a presentation, and then we take that project and we do something with it, and then we go back to the consultant if we need their help. I think that it's possible to use some of these companies like ours to accelerate that thinking, bounce back and forth, and get your people to start iterating more so than putting things in business plans for a year and then re-looking at them the next year. Because technically, if you use AI properly, you really don't need a business planning cycle to be the way it is. You can kind of look at it in real time and make decisions in real time, and maybe get away from that, those 3 months where you guys are all hiding in these presentations. So that I think would be a really cool impact of AI.
Yeah, good point, especially the point that we have to educate about the purpose of AI. Because I think that in many cases, people don't see the clear purpose, not just about AI, about many other revolutionary technology and processes which are just around the corner. Sudhir, let's continue with the same question with you.
Yeah, thanks, Dario. I think, I have two parts, to cover on this topic, right? One is, others covered already some environmental factors around the culture, and also improving trust with AI. I want to take up some basics, right, which is not there, right? Some of the basics with the people who make decisions based on AI, who are not data scientists. There are two topics that improve the trust with the models, right? One is a basic, which is, correlation does not imply causation, right? That's a really fundamental thing that people miss, and that's very important. And the second one, right, is, what is your, model performance, right? What's your AI model performance, right? What's the drift there, right? And what is the sensitivity and specificity, right, of the model, right? These are things, right, that help you improve the explainability of your model and build trust with the model for the decision maker. Some basics, but it gives you a sense of understanding what's under the hood, how does it work, and what are the hyperparameters that I need to get the best out of it, right? There was a mention by Alexei on training data sets, right? And it's a loop, right? It's a feedback loop. The more you pump into the system, right, the better your model performance is, right? In my previous job, right, I was dealing with real-time recommendations to cataract surgeons performing surgery. If my recommendation went wrong, right, from the software, there would be an explantation. The patient has to come back again and we have to fix it. It's pretty serious. So the other aspect that comes is the framework that you put, right? And I want to expand on the framework piece to culture, right? So the culture is very important for improving your trust, and it's a really good question, therefore, to connect the two. So on the culture piece, I think there are two aspects which are very important, right? The one aspect is you need to be quantitative. If you are having a culture that is more around people, rock stars, and all of that, right? To move to a more normalized way of, demystifying decisions and being more quantitative, right? This is what people talk about data-driven decision making, right? And so the culture has to feed into it, right? Show me the data, show me, what the model performance is, how you're correlating your decisions and how you're making decisions. So this is one aspect that has to shift in your culture, right? Because typically when we dealt with in my previous setting, the message we were giving was, you have a rock star performer, you have an average performer. How do you bring your average performer to rock star performance, right? And so you have to facilitate the conversation in your culture to showcase quantitatively this is where you stand. If your sales rep is using this, there is obviously somebody who's doing well in the team, there is obviously somebody who's not doing well. But if you anchor the two on saying both of your performance is going to improve, your incentives are going to be better, whatever they are, the culture amplifies the use and therefore the trust, because you have to make friends with it, right? And the second point I want to bring on the culture aspect is, we had several speakers come in lately, talk about this, and we say it has to be a cross-functional team. It can't be a team where you put a tech person and you put somebody and then the whole thing has really no grounding. So I would say the culture has to move from a pure tech or a pure business to a hybrid one where there is a healthy mix of cross-functional folks, right? So in our case, right, we have a good mix of the likes of Alexei, the likes of my data scientists, the likes of people who understand data, and the downstream users. So it needs to be all of that to improve your culture to build trust with AI. So very nice question, and I really enjoyed this question a lot more as we dig deeper.
So is there any to break down the question even further, is there any simple advice which you can give how to implement properly AI so that it makes sense and purpose within the organization? Maybe Orchid can also answer first on that, because we all know that you work with many pharma companies, so you have this different angle, this helicopter view, right?
Okay, so I mean, from my perspective, I think going back to what pharma always tries to do, which is put the customer in the center. And if you assume in this case the customer, let's talk about HCP as a customer or instead of the patient for this discussion. I think that central view needs to happen in the way the data flow comes in, but also how unfortunately the silos need to be removed. By that I mean, if you're looking at truly being customer centric and putting your physician in the middle, that physician is a human being and doesn't just talk to reps or doesn't just go into your portal doesn't, he's doing things on Twitter. He's a patient himself. There's all kinds of social things happening that need to be part of that. On top of that, the medical team is having interactions with that customer from a very different angle, and sometimes directly through marketing automation. And I feel that that's the part that's really hard for pharma. And I get why it's hard, because these are massive organizations with hundreds of people in each of those silos. So, but there has to be some kind of thinking of when you pull in the technology, whatever it is, AI or not, puts that patient or physician at least in the middle. And that's something that I really feel very passionate about, that I'm trying to bring our company to say, yes, today we're a tool for commercial, but we have organizations that are coming to us saying, we want our medical team in this platform because they have more information and more data, and we're not utilizing this for the algorithm. So how do we do that? How do we do that in a compliant way, where, of course, there's firewalls between medical and sales, medical and marketing, but there are ways of pulling that in. So I would think that one aha would be, how do you actually, as you said, I think it was Alexi, to say, pull the silos apart, not just on between data science and the business, but put it in the top of the physician and see what else is touching that physician. And sometimes we could use AI to predict behaviors of these people outside of what they're doing with pharma. And for instance, what they're doing on LinkedIn and how many followers, how many trials, publications. There's a lot of good companies pulling that data in on your competitors. And that is something that we like to pull into the algorithms as well, to bring you data that you don't have. That's one thing I think is an advice, because it'll push you above what the traditional viewpoint or the pane of glass that you're looking at, perhaps. The other is to actually score these. So we, to be able to have a way to always prioritize in real time and have triggers and scoring and that sort of thing, I think is really important, because then the users, the representatives, for instance, will actually see how that impacts their life. And to someone's point earlier, becomes a process, a way that they actually behave. So if they see the data show that the priority of this physician went from, 8 to 3, and I didn't know about it, and they act on it, and that patient is benefiting from it and gets treatment faster, I think that's very impactful, and it's very engaging for that patient and for that rep. You'll have your first champion right there. So to actually have these metrics built around how these physicians or how your customers' priorities are changing, and how the actual users are using that, I think those lessons they'll just catapult into trust, I think, rather than just building it sort of in the system. I think I mentioned this before. The other thing I think would be really good for us that we take a lot of care in is design something that's very, it's kind of a jargon word, frictionless, tools that people want to use. Data that, it's not just the data, if the insight is there and it takes the user, half an hour to figure out how to put their password in, there's a problem there. So, make it frictionless and make it easy. So the user interface is very important, I believe. And then have the feedback go in. So this culture of, if you're any kind of department going into that customer, even if you're, let's say, in market access, have that culture of them using that CRM the same way. When I was in pharma, we had to force other areas to actually use the CRM. I don't think our MSLs were actually using CRM back then. They are now. But like it was just culture. Like, I don't use that. That's commercial. No, it's your book. It's your Bible. So that sort of training as well, because all of this will build trust and will build the momentum to have a good system, whether you're building it inside or using capabilities from the outside.
Thank you, Orchid. Felipe, simple advice to build up a proper AI culture.
I'll try to keep it simple. No, I think actually it isn't that complicated, at least to start with, thinking of this crawl, walk, run, fly type of paradigm. So data drives customer engagement, or CX. Good data drives good CX. And so, I would first focus on that. How do we integrate all the different data sources that we have? And I think all of us know, whether you're in technology or not, that is a challenge. So all these digital data sources, the omnichannel perspective on all the interactions and touch points we can have customers. So integrating the data, first thing to put in place. The second thing, and then thinking again to people, process, technology, and how that needs to go lockstep. So it means you need to progress all three of those dimensions at the same speed. Otherwise, if one falls behind, you're not going to really be able to reap the benefits. So one aspect would be, okay, how do I get people to be data driven? And I need to think about harmonizing my KPIs and measures and just do plain analytics, right? How can I even just start doing really great descriptive analytics and progressing that towards predictive? And so a lot of groundwork needs to be done in terms of harmonizing your KPIs and measures and getting agreement on those harmonized KPIs and measures. And I make a distinguish between KPIs, which are really the critical few, and just a general set of measures, which can compose your KPIs. And there's quite a lot. I mean, I think we went to build up a library close to 100 different types of KPIs and measures that we could use in the commercial space at one point. Then the third thing, and Dario, I think you've heard me mention this, or certainly ask a question around it, is we realized that we needed to do a better job around, especially when it comes to digital, tagging taxonomy. So how do we set up a common taxonomy globally for how we tag our web pages, our URL, our content, and that way we can really understand what customers value, what they're consuming, help us be much more efficient in our marketing, quickly, throw away what doesn't work and what, and then continue to focus on what does, and that type of thing. So if there's going to be, those three basic things that I would do to get us on the path to AI, I'm not saying that's going to solve everything, but that's, I think, a prerequisite or a necessary first step. It's really on those things: integrating your data, thinking about that, harmonizing your KPIs and measures. That's already a good step in terms of being able to be data driven. And then number three is that common tagging taxonomy, and that's going to be absolutely critical if you want to get any kind of insight into what your customers want, and then just be able to do some global roll-ups and understand what's happening at a brand or franchise level.
Thank you, Felipe. Sutir, let's move to you.
Yeah, so I think, I echo what, Orchid and Philip mentioned. So key topics from my side that we are focusing right now is, focus on the capabilities instead of the technology dimension, right? So the capabilities of the enterprise, right, with respect to, whoever is, making key business decisions. How do we, bring them into the equation and clearly keep the value into focus, right? Right now, you seem to think of AI as this other thing, and if you bring AI and business value together, right, you are, amplifying, the impact of AI. So I think, when Philippe and Alexa mentioned about use cases, the use cases have to translate into business impact and value, and that's, the focus, right? And so in a way, right, you amplify your usage of AI and your culture of AI by keeping it actually in the, back burner, and improve your storytelling narrative on what does it mean for the business. And that's really keeping that in the center of the equation actually, scares less people away from whatever needs to be done to adopt, and move people to their core of how it is helping.
Thank you very much. Alexei?
I would say that we are talking a lot about customer centricity. Therefore, I would say that culture, it should be function of actually our customers, right? And Dario, I would suggest to rephrase the question a bit. I would suggest to think about something like, what does successful engagement look like, from the perspective of our customer and ourselves, sales representatives. And I believe that, first of all, we are talking about natural, two-way ongoing conversation between HCPs and our reps, right? Therefore, high responsiveness to customer requests is critical success factor here. It's part of the culture. Taking into the consideration challenges with access to HCPs, reps should play a role of a kind of solution provider, right? They have good chances in this case to keep relationship and ensure that they still have personal touch points if it's necessary, or any types of engagement to ensure that there is a continuous communication between two parts, right? Therefore, successful engagement is driven by the ability of a rep distill complex information into, so to say, simple messages, and the ability to use efficiently use this information to generate recommendations. I think Orhit mentioned this, in real time, using internal analytical engines. Therefore, if we approach the question of culture from the perspective of final outcomes, ensure customer satisfaction, right? Then it's really important to ensure that our customer-facing colleagues responsive. They would like to bring solution in real time, and there is a proper support from back office around from the perspective of analytics, from the perspective, I don't know, of medical colleagues, marketing colleagues, and so on, right? I don't believe that it is possible to jump from where we are now, you know, to fully customer-centric pharmaceutical companies. It's very, very difficult, right? However, if we know our ultimate goal, final objective, you know, to be customer-focused, customer-centric, then probably we would be able to find out our way to get this objective. And data, systems, and culture, these are two enablers to achieve this final objective for us.
Thank you, Alexei. We are left with 2 minutes, but we can extend it for another 2 if the audience agrees. And Alexei, you really set the stage for my next question, which is, what are the relevant insights which can lead to better customer experience towards HCPs? So then let's stay with you, Alexei.
Look, once again, this is continuous discussion, natural continuous discussion. What we can observe over the last 12, 18 months, from a transactional sales process with transactional activities in back office, SAP, you know, with transactional planning, what Orchid mentioned, brand planning. I would like to have a different one. We move to something which is continuous, right? Therefore, we have completely different expectations around all functions, engagement, collaboration between these functions, and support for customer-facing colleagues who are actually bringing all results from the whole company, from healthcare providers to healthcare practitioners, right? So that means if we are able to ensure that there is a discussion in real time, recommendations to sales representatives or next best actions, we are able to provide in real time. It is not discrete, then I think our customers will be happy. This is the first point. And the second point, which is equally important, we should be always in the listening mode, because I can see that push activities from us are working, efficiency of these push interactions are less and less effective. Therefore, we should think how to change our overall engagement process from push to pull, where healthcare practitioners are comfortable to come to us, they're able to get right service, and then it will be real partnership. It will be not one-way communication. We are moving, I don't know, from products to patients. We remain relevant for them. These are a couple of elements I believe are important for the success and appropriate customer experience on the side of physicians or pharmacists.
Thank you, Alexei. Orchid, maybe we have 1 minute per speaker left. Since
I mean, so much great stuff has been said on this already, and I think I go back to what Sudhir said earlier. You know, don't try to solve all your problems with this. This is, you know, there's a lot of things to do, and maybe the biggest impact you can make today is exactly what was just said, which is let the HCP decide where they want that information and how they want the information, and try to make that as seamless as possible. And when you do it, try to be as personalized as possible. And I think if you can think about that and have your AI predictions lead towards that, you'll find that you make better decisions using data, and the human approach is added to that, then you can win through that. So it's really trying to think of it backwards instead of pushing it down to the HCP. I really like that in terms of, you know, and even from the patient, what do they want, and design your systems around that.
Thank you, Orchid. Sudhir?
Yeah, so for me, it's the insights relating to business process performance with respect to efficiency and effectiveness are really going to help. So specifically, right, if you're looking at channel performance, campaign performance, brand performance, right, those are aspects that are going to help you, have better insights about how you're doing, right, with frequency and reach. So I would say, right, all the elements of CX, right, the metrics that you care about, should be driving you towards helping, better reach and, better personalized, impact, right, with respect to the end user. So that's really key here. The metrics that you take into account, from all the insights that you derive are really going to key, to tap into the part of the customer universe that typically doesn't meet the segmentation criteria, and also trying to improve affinity, right, for existing customers, right? So again, right, there is a whole set of metrics that you have to focus on amongst all the insights that you gather, and those metrics that you're focusing on should be focused on the process aspects, and that will help. And that's probably a great segue to Philippe to close probably.
Thank you, Sudhir. And
Thank
final
you,
words,
Sudhir.
Felipe.
Yeah, I'll try to make it very quick. So it's kind of re-insisting on something that's pretty much said, which is don't try to boil the ocean. Really resist that temptation to go straight and say, I'm going to do omni-channel, next best engagement. We're even calling it next best experience now internally, just to give you that omni-channel flavor. So certainly, don't do that. Think big, start small, set up some experiments on some very simple use cases using that terminology. I think you'll find that there's a lot of very simple tools that can help you get started. Market maturity is something that's super important. Probably working with Orchid's company can get you started on some good, smaller use cases, but experiment and grow from there. If that was one piece of advice I would give, that would be it.
Thank you, Felipe. And this leads me to the end. Thank you so much for joining this interesting webinar. We will also publish it on our official YouTube channel. And once again, thank you, Orchid, Alexei, Felipe, and Sudhir. It was an amazing conversation, and looking for the next one. Take care.
Thank
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. We're going to webcam next time.